it's important for Christians to think through, okay, why is it important that I believe what I believe? And what is my history to this?
Right. Yeah.
What is the history that gave me the Bible?
I'm trying more to speak in an accessible way,
right. See,
in my public and private teaching about all these kind of things. Why do we believe what we believe?
How does this particular church today connect back to all these history of Christians that have come before us?
Right.
If this is my community, not only that I'm receiving teaching from only, but that I'm also serving and upholding and committing myself to, and all this stuff, like, it matters, right? So Reformed is just a label, that kind of explains that branch.
We want to introduce you to an entire history.
Yeah.
We want to introduce you to an entire history that once you cut your teeth on it and once you spend your time on it, like I said, we've seen this so much. People are like, wow, I had no idea. Well, thanks for watching another AGR videocast. Today I have my dear friend Adam Kaloostian on the program. It's good to have you here.
Thanks. I'm honored, Chris.
Yeah. So Adam and I go way back. You attended at Westminster a few years before I showed up, and you were the rowdy class that we were glad that we escaped.
Is that what they said? Yeah, we just prepared the way for the golden children who came after
That's
us,
right.
I think. So
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
the
yeah.
real pastor.
It was an exciting time when we were in seminary, man. We had like turnover in the faculty and all kinds of controversies during that time. It was fun, man.
The 90s. The 90s.
It's great. Yeah.
That was a whole different era.
Yeah, go look it up. Yeah, it's good times.
Yeah. Well,
but this place is important. Escondido URC. I mean, before your time, they had like real pastors coming through here. You know what I'm saying? Like Kamiga and stuff. Yeah. I mean, this is my first Reformed church and made profession of faith here. And I remember Pastor Kamiga interviewing me right in front of the elders, which was, new experience to me. And he just like looked at me and said, I felt like it was in the Blues Brothers, when the nun is like interviewing them. And I'm just like, I felt so small, whatever. And he just said, why do you want to be Reformed? Join our church,
With that deep voice.
Yeah, exactly. In front of all these guys. Yeah. And
were they having cigars at that time?
No. See, now I wish that I had been part of that generation. That was early. Actually, the church I served in Ontario. So downstairs from the council room, you go outside where people enter the sanctuary and the stairs that go up to the meeting room. There's a little cigar holder.
Really?
It's actually poured in cement right outside. It's fantastic. Yeah. So all the old guys used to tell the stories when they were kids. They would go switch like the cigars when people would leave them outside during worship. So guys would pick up the wrong cigar, half-smoked cigar later. Anyway.
Why don't we do that anymore?
Yeah.
Those would be the best consistory meetings.
Yeah. So I love it here. I'm glad to be here. Honored to be here.
Yeah. So what did you say when he asked you, why do you want to be Reformed?
I told him, of course I had all this like study in my head, not only because of the seminary, but just preparing for profession of faith. I didn't know, was he going to ask me like theological stuff? And it was very personal, which I remember. And so the answer that came to my mind was, well, the main thing is for me, what changed, there was an answer to my conscience. I just, how could God love me? And so it's my sin, but what Christ did.
Right.
And does for me. And that's all I could really spit out. And
it's a pretty good answer. I'll take that. I'll take that.
It seemed okay. Unfortunately for them, they passed me, but it was great. A short time here because that was shortly after there. I went off for my internship, but graduated and stuff. So
you went to the Ontario United Reformed Church. You were there for 20 years?
Yeah, I was altogether. So went as an intern, and that church was, like Escondido has, long-time, faithful, established Dutch Reformed congregation that was receiving more and more interest from people from outside, like me, right? And so, as that was happening, they wanted somebody who spoke newly Reformed people's language, knew some of their pitfalls, and also could help. The dynamic in Ontario was great in those early years in this specific way that the old guard that was still there in great number, just because the demographics were still strong, with that in the area, and those people were still, they weren't with the Lord yet either, Right. So they had an incredible stability in the Christian faith and life and in church. And what new people brought in was a renewed enthusiasm for the theological distinctives of the Reformed.
Mm-hmm.
So both groups kind of helped each other. It helped get the older people excited about being Reformed again, so to speak. And then the newly Reformed people like me, who are a mess in all kinds of different ways, we really benefited from the stability and the maturity of that congregation. So anyway, I just came in to kind of help serve the new crowd coming in, and then was ordained as a second pastor a few months later, pastor of outreach and that sort of stuff. And then worked under a tremendous mentor, Pastor Rand Lanke, now retired from the URC, although still active in the NAPARC churches. But anyway, so we were together a few years. And then when he took a call to another URC, they just appointed me to the main preaching responsibilities and stuff. So I ended up being there 20 years about altogether. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And then you went and did what no sane person in the ministry would do.
Right,
no,
right. Yeah. It goes with the territory, I think. Yeah.
You went and planted a church.
Yeah.
I mean, that's remarkable because, I mean, I think it's right for older seasoned men who've been in the ministry to tackle church plants, but it's rare that somebody wants to do that.
Right. Because of lack of stability or whatever. Yeah. So, but 3 years ago, the URC in Pasadena called me to church planting in Ventura, California. Right. They had some families there that had in and out over the years. Some had long since left, but they had 3 households there that were still desiring a URC. And so we thought it would be a good place for a project. And we are.
That's great. Yeah. So you have a building.
We have a building.
Nice too. Yeah, that's rare for a church plant.
No, we're thankful. I mean, we leased from a great, became great friends of ours, a Missouri Synod Lutheran congregation. And, as their ministry overall was winding down, eventually they gave their building back to their district. And then the district ended up allowing us to, buy it if we could match the, anyway, the Lord provided us, it stretches us obviously, but we're very grateful to have a place and have that stability. Because a lot of our church plants like that we're familiar with in the URC and of course, friends of ours in other denominations. I mean, that's a big thing. Leasing is expensive.
Especially in Southern California.
Yeah. Leases are in short supply and it's just hard to, psychologically, honestly, it's very difficult. Before we owned the building, even though we're still vulnerable, we have to keep it, right? But just psychologically to lease and not feel like you have a home, that's just tough. You're already unstable in a lot of ways in a church plant. But anyway, so we're there. We're in Ventura in Midtown, and we're grateful.
If you're watching and you're near Ventura, you need to stop by and come to. What's the full Ventura Reformed? Ventura Reformed. With the Reverend Adam Kaloostian. So, well, that's great. We pray for your work. We're excited about your work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So we thought we'd talk about something important today. We think.
Great.
I was just, we were just talking before the program. I had Doug Wilson on recently and had like 60,000 views. And I went and looked at the analytics. And 80% watched 30 seconds.
So we got to say something.
Something
interesting in every 30-second clip,
every
right?
30-second clip. You're supposed to do it right away to hold the attention.
Yeah.
But I think your story did that. So,
maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll find out. Yeah.
So anyways, it is kind of sad that you have to have controversy for people to watch. That's just our day. That's what I struggle with a little with the program. It's like you want to help people with sound doctrine. You want to help people grow, but it seems like you're feeding this beast on the internet that's just about controversy and people wasting time at times.
Right. Well, and just the temptation that I would have myself. And I lived this before. So, I'll just be honest about it. In different iterations of ministry and podcast world and all that too. It's like you want to be edgy and you want to, I've got no problem. My temptation is not going to be quiet about things that need to be said, right? So I'll say things that need to be said and I'll say edgy things, critical things that I think are important. But of course, then you're tempted to be arrogant, harsh, cross lines, be wrong about some of that stuff, be acerbic. And so I did that sometimes. And
Yeah,
I'm not proud of it,
Yeah, you were one of the pioneers.
Yeah.
Of
But
podcasting.
some of that was good, but some of it
good.
wasn't.
Sinners and Saints.
Yeah. Some of that stuff was good, and I would stand by it. Others of it, I repent from it. But I think the point is that an additional temptation, right, in the whole broadcast world of any kind is just that you're to get interest or clicks or think that you have influence or feel significant yourself, whatever you're chasing for a bad reason, say, it's just a stronger temptation.
Right.
And so it's goes with the territory, but
that's exactly right. Well, what we thought we'd talk about today to sort of begin is this question of what it means to be reformed.
Yeah.
We deal with that a lot in Southern California. We, obviously we have, I don't know, Escondido is kind of a Bible belt. There's a lot of people, in the area in churches, but there's a lot of people searching. And then they see this thing on the sign Reformed.
Yeah.
And it's really confusing for people because, within the sort of tent of evangelicalism, Protestantism, you got all kind of variations. And then you people generally might know what a Methodist is or a Baptist or a Lutheran, but they say Reformed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, like just people that read the sign, like, or, see on the internet, oh, you're planning a church, like meet people. Oh, what kind of church? Reformed. Okay. Like there's two categories of people, one of Christian people that see that. One is like a person who already believes they have some idea of what that is, the word reformed.
Right.
So this is important to me because there's a lot of, for churchy people and Southern California evangelicals and beyond, like reformed, maybe they've heard some things about it. Maybe their church has some degree of reformed beliefs or convictions, or their pastor says, I lean toward the reformed, this or that. But in that case, to me, if people already are aware of the term, what I think is important is to distinguish what is sort of properly reformed, so to speak. And we could get into a long thing about that. But to me, it's basically defined as a group, a church that is part of a denomination or federation of churches that believes and practices one of the two major groups of Reformed confessions, either the Westminster Confession of Faith and its catechisms, or the three forms of unity, which the Heidelberg-Catechism, the Canons-of-Dort, the Belgic-confession. And why I say that's important is that those are sort of official documents that give a full expression to historically what Reformed churches believed and practiced. Because today, Reformed can just mean piecemeal parts of the Reformed tradition, but people see that as Reformed, but it's really, and it is to whatever degree. But when you see, and even some of these churches use Reformed in their name or on their labels, which is so I just think that that's the first thing. If Reformed already means something to you, this distinction is important.
It is.
Is it a full confessional Reformed church? Do they believe and subscribe to these confessions, and do they practice them in the beliefs and the life of the church? That's a big thing.
It's a big thing
that I think a lot of people are confused about. I meet people. Ventura is a small town, 100,000. Oxnard, same thing. It's basically same town. Geographically, 200,000. Camarillo, another 50, whatever. So, let's say that Oxnard plain, let's say it's 500,000 people. Not that big relative to Southern California terms, but I meet people all the time who's, Reformed. Oh, my church is Reformed, or this church is Reformed.
Right.
And what that is the furthest thing from it, except on maybe a couple of issues. And that's why this is important, because historically, Reformed churches are the ones who embrace and practice from these two confessional traditions. It's worth looking into if Reformed has any interest into. So, I mean, that's sort of one set of people that I like to talk to. What is Reformed? Well, look, read the whole sets of confessions and see how the churches have historically practiced them. That would be one thing.
Right. And there's two, like you said, there's two sort of streams of the Reformed tradition, if you will. There's the sort of the sort of Presbyterian stream where you have the Westminster Confessions, 1645, 46. And then you have the Continental stream, which a little bit earlier spread throughout Europe from the time of the Reformation, and the confessional documents, the confessions that the Continental stream adheres to is the Heidelberg-Catechism, the Belgic-confession, and the Canons-of-Dort. And you're right; they provide us a whole sort of system of what we confess together, system of doctrine that was wrestled through by previous generations of what the Scriptures teach us on sort of the core of our faith and what's important for us to, as Ephesians says, walk together in the spirit of unity and the bond of peace.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, and we'll talk more about this too, but I just think, another thing that we find ourselves talking to people about is just to get an understanding overall of, who Christians are, who have they been historically.
Right.
Like the shorthand way I like to talk about it is, so you have, today, it's easy to just look at 4 groups. So you have like what could be called the Orthodox churches, although they're not all institutionally connected and they're not all united as sometimes it's presented and whatever. But anyway, so you have the Orthodox churches, you have Roman Catholicism. Most people are familiar with that. And then you have the historic Protestants.
Right.
And I kind of divide those into 2
I agree.
categories,
Yep.
either Reformed and Lutheran. And then among the Reformed, I do what you did. I would say it's the continental Reformed stream and the Presbyterian stream, although I put them together, right? Under the Reformed banner.
Right.
And then the 4th category I would say today is more like the broader evangelical Bible church thing. So if those big 4 categories, like just what are we talking about? What are the Reformed churches? Well, we're one of the main historic Protestant groups.
Right. And people, we'll back up on that because I think this is important, especially when you talk sort of broad evangelicalism. People, when they ask me sort of what is Reformed, I get that at the gym or whatever.
Yeah.
I first say, well, are you Christian?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
They'll say.
Yeah.
I said, so you just attend a Bible church. Well, then you should thank the Reformed.
Yeah.
Because you are given back the Bible to be able to be where you are.
Tip of the cap to the Lutherans, of course, too. Right?
The Lutherans,
all the historic Protestants, right? There
historic
we go.
Protestants. That's exactly right. Yeah. So, but I think it is an interesting thing to wrestle through for people because I think you're right. They hear the name Reformed and they've come across it. I think, there've been a series of movements that have happened. I think this is just, you can tell me what you think about this, but there's been a somewhat of a reaction in evangelicalism to the superficiality of it. So, people, I think that we're in a time where people are wanting to think more about, what do they believe? What do they confess? We're being pushed that way. And they're realizing the approaches to worship that have been really kind of entertainment based and those sort of things really haven't been fulfilling. I'm not saying there's still a lot of people in that, don't get me wrong. But when they come across Reformed, they've come across things like the Young Restless and Reform movement, people like Mark Driscoll, who had a huge, following, the Acts 29 network. So they've seen these shifts of people who have moved. And, I always think, I was talking with Chad Vegas on the program not so long ago, that I remember when the emergent church was big and they were kind of it was a young group burnt out on the sort of boomer evangelical approach, mega church approach of worship, Heibels, Willow Creek, what's his name over here? I'm getting
Rick Warren.
Yeah, Rick Warren.
Yeah.
How did I forget that? Anyways, so they wanted to go back to something ancient.
Yeah.
So they wanted candles. If you went in Driscoll's church, it was dark. He was tapping into what he knew people, especially a new generation, wanted. So they come across this Reform thing and they're confused and they may adopt, or they may think, okay, well, I've heard about the 5 points of Calvinism, 4-pointer, whatever. So that they're wrestling through some of the more deeper doctrinal distinctives, but you're right. They don't have the whole picture.
Right. Not in the context of a thoroughgoing Reformed church. Right. That's
Right.
So, I think what you're getting to is important too, because I think, so that's true for that crowd, but the other kind of people you meet are people who don't know what Reformed is at all. And
that's true.
And especially who cares. So this is sort of important, right? Because today, like, all the Christians were just feel like they're getting their teeth kicked in culturally or whatever. So, there's obviously a lot of times they just want to shrink back into what we have in common. And it's not so much about like, isn't there sort of a general understanding of what basic biblical Christianity is, and everybody's fine. Then you just go talk about like your different emphases from there or whatever. But so this is the other way to talk to people. So somebody asks, why do you have the name Reformed in your church? Well, let me explain it to you. So like you said, Are you a Christian? Okay, if you're a Christian, probably there's 3 things we all agree on that would mean. Number 1 is just in your life, like whatever you do, your vocation, whatever God has called you, husband, father, whatever your job is, whatever interests you have and hobbies, whatever your family responsibilities are, whatever it is in the community, like you do that following Jesus. You submit to his lordship in every aspect of your life. That's one thing it means to be a Christian. The second thing is you have a relationship with a church. Okay. And let me go to the third one, because I don't want to come back to the church.
That's
so the church, but I mean, I think people even, of course you meet that person who says it's me and Jesus, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think if most Christians would agree, you read the scripture, you have to be connected to a church. We'll come back to that. The third thing is like the private piety, right? So, I mean, you pray to God, and I'm not talking about in church or whatever, or if you have a job with other Christians or in ministry, of course you're praying. I'm talking about as an individual Christian or in a household, I should be praying. I should have some kind of meditation on the word of God or in some form or whatever outside of church. Great. But come back to that church thing. I'm just saying, like, basic Christian life, in every way, live under Christ's lordship, pray and read the Bible or some form at home. But church, like if you're going to go to church, Christians have been going to New Covenant churches for 2,000 years.
Right.
Like you think it would be important to think about the history of those churches. What did they agree on? What did they disagree on? And why does it matter? So this is what I'm trying to say. If somebody says, what is reformed, or I want to tell somebody what's reformed, I want somebody to think about one of the basic 3 legs of the Christian life belonging to church is that churches have some agreements and churches have some disagreements, and some of those disagreements are consequential.
Right.
And I think that the average person in Southern California who is a Christian, and this sounds critical because I don't mean it to be critical. I know myself having gone through this awakening, because whatever you grow up in, whatever you go around, wherever you feel connected, by default, that's how you think. You don't know outside of that. But what I'm saying is that at a certain point, it's worth thinking about what has happened over a couple thousand years that the churches are what they are. If you use those 4 categories we talked about earlier, if there's the Orthodox churches, plural, if there's Roman Catholicism, if there's the historic Protestant communions, and if there's the broader evangelicalism today of different kinds, which I would argue actually have some core distinctives as a group that differentiate them from these other groups. Like what are the things that they agree on? What things are different? I mean, this is important. If I have to go to church, if this is my community, not only that I'm receiving teaching from only, but that I'm also serving and upholding and committing myself to, and all this stuff, like it matters, right? So reformed is just a label, that kind of explains that branch. And so that's when people say, okay, well, what's the same, what's different, and then you get in that discussion.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think you're right that for most people, they're just going to say, what is that? Right. What is reformed? As for a segment of the sort of evangelical world that has some familiarity with it, maybe they've read about the horrors of Calvinism online, or Calvin burning Spiritus or whatever. They've heard this kind of stuff, and so they think, predestination's awful or whatever. So they've maybe come across some rambunctious bunch in the mix. That is a group, but I think you're right. Most people in broad evangelicalism don't know still really what it is, because, the population of what we call NAPARC, that's a network of Reformed churches in North America. I don't know what the total population of that is, but compared to evangelicalism, it's not overwhelmingly large, so.
And even if you wanted to like broaden the circle and say, okay, even though we're not Lutherans, but we, historic confessional Lutheran communions are part of the historic Protestant family, right? And you want to do like confessional Anglicans of all time. I mean, you can broaden like some of our, how you view our family of churches. But I mean, the main point, because again, I could just hear somebody saying like, why? Who cares? So I think this is the point. The point is the question, what is reformed? I mean, it matters because we should be thinking about the teachings of Jesus in the scriptures applied in his churches, we should be part of that discussion that has happened for 2,000 years.
Right.
Because here's the thing.
There's a history.
There's a history to the church.
Right.
And all the questions of what was Jesus teaching and what does it matter? And what kind of things did Jesus and his apostles in the scriptures tell us were of more primary importance, and what things we should leave to conscience, or just, we're still trying to figure out, like all those kind of questions. The church has been talking about them for a couple thousand years, and these traditions have interacted together and with each other and formulated their their answers to these questions. And what I'm saying is that a lot of just modern people are in what they are, and they're not aware of these discussions.
No, this is important. They're not thinking. I mean, the reason that little phrase is common: know what you believe and why you believe it. And again, I know it's we're not attacking here when we say this, but a lot of Christians don't give a lot of thought to this today.
Sure,
they don't think about history. That I think of my father-in-law when I was dating Darcy. He found out I was Reformed. He says, "What's that?" And he thought, "Is that a cult?" Like, what is that? And then I said, I call him Dad now, but I said, "Steve," I said, go back and look at the history here.
Yeah.
So he read Calvin's Institutes from cover to cover.
Yeah.
And then he was blown away, heard about this guy named Bob Godfrey, started listening. He says, there's a whole history here I had no idea of.
Yeah.
What he was craving and what he found were the very roots and the depth that he didn't know he wanted.
Sure.
And that was important for him. Now he's like, he appreciates everything, because it's not like these truths were discovered yesterday.
Right.
These are things Christians in the Spirit has worked in the history of the church for how far back. So it's important. I do think Adam, they come into a Reformed church, and I think immediately there's sort of shell shock.
Yeah. Because
the experience in sort of what your fourth category was, broad evangelicalism, the first sense you get is, okay, these people take it pretty seriously. Like what they're doing, the worship, what they believe.
A
little heavy, what they confess. And it requires the use of the mind.
Yeah.
It requires thought. It requires commitment. And that stands out like somebody might say an organ stopped.
Yeah.
They don't use organs anymore. But you get the point. Like, so people walk into this and they're confused because, okay, I don't know how quite to process this. This is on a whole different plane than I'm used to. And these people are taking serious what we call means of grace. They're preaching the word. They're taking serious the sacraments. They're taking serious what they sing. The sort of entertainment element is not there. I mean, it can be in some Reformed churches. We're not saying it's not. But for the historic tradition, there are convictions on all these things, like you're saying, that it's important for Christians to think through, okay, why is it important that I believe what I believe? And what is my history to this?
Right. Yeah.
What is the history that gave me the Bible?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot, right? So I think you're talking about the reaction of people introducing things, but maybe interesting to talk about like what the marks are of what would be considered a faithful, broader evangelical.
Yeah, that's good. Are there, I mean, people look around for church. Do they ever think, okay, there are churches that are faithful and there are churches that are not? I think people have a general conception of that. What is the standard?
Yeah.
Like, is there a standard, and how do we know that standard?
Yeah. I think, the standard is primarily relevance.
Yeah.
Like in the sense that, and just in my experience, I mean, I think, they're smaller, this and that, but the good size, well-established over a few decades, broader evangelical churches, they have a few things in common. One of them is that they connect with people. That's not a bad thing.
No.
But it's
community.
So for example, so usually somebody who's like a pastor who's very well-spoken and is able to show in every time they speak the immediate sort of practical application or effect of whatever the topic is, and that's sort of expected and does happen, I would say, by and large, in these successful churches. There's a style of singing, you mentioned, that
it's a big hurdle.
seems to connect with, the majority of the people that are there.
Right.
Now you mentioned the word entertainment, right? So I think, like the rough edge of, like, a good thing about it would be when it's done efficiently and simply and beautifully and actually engenders the singing of the group and the congregation. Now, the bad end of it would be, what is the content of what is being sung?
Yeah.
And is it spilling over into entertainment like a concert or a lounge act or whatever?
Right.
Yeah, that's a problem. But anyway, I'm just saying, when you go to a church, and the third thing is, like, what programs are there to fit the need of my life situation or my family? The easy low-hanging fruit one is what is it doing for my children? Which the whole youth ministry culture of broader evangelicalism, you think you can see the results of it after a few decades in terms of how shallow Christianity has become. Like, of course, they complain about that, but we try to still keep doing the old methods. Now, but okay, it's not to say that preaching and teaching shouldn't be good.
Right.
And that
boring.
Exactly. And that the music should be awkward. No, the people should be singing and engaged emotionally in the singing, right? But that doesn't mean a particular kind of style per se, right? And you also have to think about what they're singing. And I'm also saying, like, the church, broadly speaking, should understand how is it ministering to people of all ages. Doesn't mean they have a program for everybody, but how is it designed and how is it helping spiritually, for example, the youth or whatever. So a church should be doing all these things, but there's a way that it's done. There's a style that it's done. It's like, I know it when I see it. In the broader evangelical church, that basically it either passes muster or it doesn't.
Right.
Right.
On personal likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
But I mean,
but okay. But my point, I guess the adjacent point is, to me, it's a lot of times it's cart before the horse. If you're talking about church, if it's one of the main things that it means to follow Jesus, that I'm connected and invested to a local church and the people that are there, that's sort of my immigrant community while I'm passing through this age, right? That's the embassy, But so if I'm supposed to be there, okay, so let's say we check off all those things that we talked about. I track with the teacher.
Right.
My needs are met. The music is good, whatever. Okay, let's say those things are good. But what we haven't had the discussion about prior to that is where does the church stand in the discussions that have been going on for 2,000 years historically about what the church actually believes, the content of what it teaches,
and what people need,
and how it affects the ministry. Right. So this is the thing that in broader evangelicalism you say, oh, we have a statement of faith. Our pastor is doctrinally trained, went to seminary. He has his theological opinions. It's, well, wait a minute, but so this is the interesting thing. They have their independent statements of faith, or they have their networks. They're not denomination, whatever, that come out of an historic tradition that has confessional documents and takes certain positions in this conversation historically. Yeah. They have this lowest common denominator statement, idiosyncratic statement. They say they're anti-denominational a lot of times, but really it's a denomination of one church.
Right. Right.
So the thing is, there's no connectedness.
There's no connectedness to the history.
No. And they do have positions, but a lot of times they're not even aware. I got to tell you, not even the pastors are aware of really where they are in the historic traditions.
Right.
Because they've subsumed, they've flattened that out. They've subsumed that under pragmatism.
Yeah.
What is working in terms of numbers? What is being, what do people feel is being, I don't know, effective spiritually in people's lives or whatever. But my point is, it's sort of a modern arrogance, in my opinion, divorcing itself from the historic doctrinal conversation of the Christian church, which has been going on for 2,000 years. This is why I'm talking about the confessions. I don't care about the confession. When one says it's not the scripture, it's just tools to help summarize it. But the thing is, it's what's connecting us in this dialogue over a couple thousand years with the scriptures.
Right.
And saying, like, no, this is good, this belief, this distinctive belief, sorry, that's wrong, like Orthodox churches or Roman Catholicism, look, hey, the church can err. The Pope can err. Like, I'm a Protestant. I believe that. Right. So I can't be part of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But these churches, it's like, get into the understanding of these issues connected with the church throughout history. Don't just think, well, we're modern, Americans, and we're going to figure it out better than everybody has.
Right. Yeah. And we should think, why did Christians do what they did before? Yeah. Why did they have these convictions? Why do they matter? And why do I need it? Those are really important questions for people today. That's what we want to try to help people do is to get them thinking about these important questions with regard to the church and the kingdom of God. I mean, unfortunately, I think I don't say most, but I don't want to paint a broad brush here, but in broad evangelicalism, most people view the church as a social kind of club, and they view the church as meeting a social need. There is a social need. Yeah. God gave us a community. That's super important. But that community gathers around serious conviction on certain things, right? Yeah. Serious conviction on, when I come back to what we need, most people approach the church today like consumers. I've decided what I want the church to be for me. Instead of asking the all-important question is, why did God give a church to begin with? What did it mean historically? And what did he define for us that we need in giving us the church? And that's why you come into a Reformed church, it's going to be awkward at first. I always tell people, listen, if this is new to you, sit for 6 months. Sure. Don't make a decision right away. Yeah. Get used to it. If you come in and boom, you're gone, you haven't really listened to or given thought to or sat under what's happening for a period of time. You need that. Yeah. And what people tend to find. I mean, come on. Hey, look, if you're in any church, I don't care. If you have any involvement with the other people that are there, more than just a greeting on Sunday and a handpicked select social group that you get, with those people outside church. If you have any more than that involvement in any kind of church, broader evangelical too, it's already going to be awkward. Yeah, it's all. So I don't like even visiting other churches. This is awkward. Where you could. The joke is, I don't even like going to my own church. It's awkward. But no, but the point is what I'm saying. Like, any church is awkward. If it's going to be awkward anyway, but this is one of the main pillars. Like, go be awkward in the right place. Go be awkward in the right place. And here's what the awkwardness is going to feel like in a Reformed church. You're gonna notice a people who take sin really seriously. Yeah, like there's a weight of that. That's why we have the church, because it's historically a hospital for sinners. That kind of language. It's a place where God is helping and making known the greatest solution for people's problems in this life. Yeah. So there's going to be a weight to it. There's going to be a gravity to it. There's going to be an uncomfortableness to the message. But as you know, what was greatly recovered at the time of the Reformation was the doctrine of justification by grace through faith alone. In other words, the recovery of the Christian gospel is the aim of a Reformed church is not just to deal with symptoms. We're not just dealing with symptoms of people's issues that are a result of sin. We're going after the jugular. We're dealing with sin, and we're proclaiming the gospel of grace, and we're helping people to be lifted up because we believe that is the power of God to save people. Yeah. And I mean, let's come back to that. The core difference, the gospel and its embrace and its proclamation. I do want to say one thing. It's like, I want to be careful. I don't want to, let's just make it real personal. Like the church plant in Ventura, the Escondido URC, our classis churches, meaning our regional churches that are in the United Reformed Churches of North America, that we all work so closely together. And then more broadly, like the North American Presbyterian Reformed Church family or the International Conference of Reformed Churches, whatever. I just want to point out that as much as we love our churches and are all invested in them and to serve Christ in them, I don't congratulate us. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't want to be self-congratulatory. I don't want to say that, but look, our churches have problems. Yes, absolutely. Our churches have problems. Right. And we have temptations that other churches don't have, and we have sins that other churches don't have, and we have weaknesses where other churches are stronger. I want to say that very clearly. No, that's good. But good. So, okay. This is just meant to say, like, let's go back to that discussion. If Christ wants me in the church,
Let me think about the churches over the past couple thousand years. Let me recognize that maybe what's sort of a popular church in Southern California today, let's think about what it has in common and what it doesn't, what it disagrees with when it comes to these historic communions. And this is just to ask that question. And sorry, now, if somebody's saying like, I don't know, pastor comes to visit your church, how do I start to get a belief on that? I don't know. What do you have, like a new members class? Like, I don't know. People visit. It's a big, Escondido URC's big church. Totally different dynamic than Ventura. But if somebody walks in, they let's say they hear your program.
So we just had this.
Okay,
right?
so what happens?
So
how do you guide them to answer this question?
Let's
teach me, Pastor. What do they do?
Let's do that. So we have a young man coming to the church. He heard On Abounding Grace.
Yeah.
I just sat with him this week. It's all brand new to him.
Yeah.
He was in a very liberal mainline church, and he's sitting in the mainline church and he's struggling. He's struggling because he's like, this is not feeding. I'm not getting any substance here. Like, and I don't know how to process this. Is this what church is? Right. So, obviously we can look at a variety of different circumstances, but this particular circumstance was a young man searching. Okay. It wasn't raised as a Christian. He comes and he sits in the PCUSA church, very liberal, very mainline. And he's struggling because he knows there's something more. He knows that he needs more depth. He knows that he's had some basic presentation of the gospel, and he knows he wants to add some meat to that.
So he comes here.
So he hears on the radio. He says, I hear this guy on the radio. It's ironic people still listen to brick and mortar radio, but he's at his work. He says, I can listen all day long to radio. So that's all I have. I can't get on my phone. So I listen to radio. I heard, he says, he's been showing up at nights. I've been preaching on the doctrine of justification by grace through faith alone. Like,
and just attending the service,
just attending the evening service.
He's starting to get a feel for what is reformed. He's been faithful. Whatever. Yeah.
He's been coming, and he's hearing the doctrine of justification. And this is not light stuff. Like, I'm going through Paul's arguments. I'm trying to be very sensitive to what the text is, preaching that text, making the case of the arguments that are made, showing Christ, preaching the gospel, fleshing out all these things that he's wrestling with. Okay.
Yeah,
So then go.
No. Yes. Okay. You keep going back to the gospel. I want to talk about that.
Maybe but I want to answer your question.
I'm just saying practically, right?
Yeah,
so
I'm going to
this
answer
guy
your
walks
question.
in.
So I want to answer your question.
This guy, he starts so whatever he's heard, he walks in.
Yeah.
He starts hearing more from you in the preaching.
Yeah.
But ends up sitting down with you. How did that happen?
So I said to him, like,
you just went, you saw some guy you didn't know, so you introduced yourself sometime.
He's at the door. He's at the door, comes up. I've seen him for a few Sundays. I say, hey, I've seen you here now for a while. He says, well, I heard you on the radio. I want to, I'm really enjoying, this is new to me, but I'm really appreciating the messages. They're actually feeding me. So we get together and we start talking about history, like you're talking about.
Okay.
We start talking about confessions, and we see this all the time in Southern California. All the time, people come in when they're hungry. Now, this is, I think, the Spirit's preparatory work for people.
Sure, yeah.
Not everyone gets to this place, and it may happen later, right? But you do have to have a level of hunger for something more to come into a Reformed church.
Sure.
If you're exposed to broader evangelicalism.
Yeah.
Because you're looking for more depth. I mean, this is what happened with Calvary Chapel years ago. Calvary Chapel was, hey, we're going through the Bible verse by verse.
Yeah.
We're going to exposit. And these people start getting to Romans 9 and start getting to these passages. And they're like, whoa, I'm getting hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting hungry. I want more.
Mm-hmm.
So we see this. Then you give them the confessions.
Yeah.
And they say, what is this?
Yeah. So I'm just,
whoa.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying is you've connected them to history.
Yeah.
And they want to understand it.
Okay.
So he's going to take the class.
So you have a class.
Yes,
this is where I'm going.
Yeah,
so I'm just trying to say practically, what does it look like?
Yes.
I mean, just because for like in a big church like this, guy comes in off the street. Okay, shows some interest.
Yeah,
fine. So first of all, it's interesting that he met with you.
Yeah.
So and you have a colleague, Pastor Angelo, like you guys. So I mean, you guys actually meet with people.
Yeah,
which is pretty neat. Like especially in your context, a big church, right?
Yeah, I always try for the visitors.
Yeah,
like one of my chief goals is to get around to these people. You know, we had a couple new families Sunday from the podcast. I try to get to them, and I want to see where they are, why they're here.
Right.
And if they're open to this, yes, we provide a membership class.
Okay.
And in that membership class, we go through our core distinctives of the faith. We go through our history.
Okay.
We explain, and it also provides them, Adam, an opportunity to ask the questions that are burdening them and that are burning on in them. Like they have questions.
Yeah.
They want to have questions answered. And I think that's where it's really important when you talk about the failure on our side. Yes, I think it's a failure across the board of churches to really engage visitors in the areas of their struggle and meeting that need by helping them understand. And if you give them that kind of help, it goes a long way.
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. In our context, same idea is that we love to, again, if somebody comes and is interested, I'll meet with them. Right. I mean, our project is different where we are. Yeah. So I have more time. I mean, that's part of my main responsibility is to meet with people at whatever level of interest they aren't with the church. And it's like, talk to them about church history, talk to them about, read the confessions with them for the first time, explain to them what churches agree on, what they disagree on, why it matters, this kind of thing. And so I just,
but that hunger has
idea.
Yeah. Okay. You can get people off the street who stumble into the church and they're going to immediately feel if they're used to a certain model, this is so uncomfortable. I don't like it. I'm done. That happens.
Yeah.
That happens. We expect that. We've seen that too much.
Yeah.
There has to be from people a craving and a desire for something to fill the void of what they know should be there. They know there should be something of more depth to this. And they're looking for, like you're saying, they're looking not just for a history, they're looking for roots. They're looking to understand how does this particular church today connect back to all these history of Christians that have come before us? Mm-hmm. When they start seeing that and they sit under the ministry for a while, it's like a hooking effect.
Sure.
And you can't break it once that happens.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's important to emphasize, but it takes effort and patience. That's why we have pastors to try to minister to people where they are and help them on those issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course we focused entirely on the Christian part of the population,
right?
Which, today is decreasing in size across all kinds of churches.
Well, and churches are emptying across the board.
Right. And so I could talk, maybe another time we could talk about this too. Just, what, how are we speaking? How are we presenting ourselves as Reformed churches to the increasing part of the population that is whatever, unchurched or non-churched, de-churched,
this
whatever.
is another good question because, our society is shift. It's not really postmodern anymore. It's, sort of anti-Christian now. I mean, we've had shifts. There's still elements of postmodernism that are common, but the assumption, I think the wrong assumption we have made in America is that, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. I got 5 skateboarders out here the other day, young kids. So they're skateboarding and our first idea is like, kick them off. Like they shouldn't be skateboarding on the church property. Yeah. I'm like, no. Yeah. Like, I'm gonna go talk to them. Yeah. So I walk up to them. And
Not me. I would have kicked them off.
Yeah. Depends on what they're doing. But I go up and talk to them. And I said to him, listen, you guys, I'm the pastor here. Hey, I'm just curious. You guys ever been to church? There was 5 or 6 kids there. Not one of them had ever been to church.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I say, do you have a Bible? No.
Yeah.
I don't have a Bible. So you're in a whole generation right now and our assumption has been that, everything's sort of Christianized in America. This is, we've reverted back. We're at a place where the sort of soil for getting out to the people, you cannot make assumptions that they know any of this.
Yeah.
They do not.
Yeah. And not only that, but everybody that's in your church, regardless of what you want to think, like on these basic Christian convictions that God exists, that he reliably communicates, in the scriptures, that Christ is the only savior, these things that are generally disregarded and maligned by the unbelieving world. By the way, all the same criticisms, questions, sort of intellectual stress and doubts. This has infected everybody in your church. Well, it's hyperbole, but it's affected a lot of people in your church.
Right.
And so if we're not aware of this and speaking to it, not only on the outside, but inside, then we're just being negligent. Yeah. I mean, this is, I find this to be true that I'm trying more to speak in an accessible way,
right? See, that's
in
good.
my public and private teaching about all these kind of things. Why do we believe what we believe? Not only in the Reformed distinctive sense as a branch of Christianity, but also in more broadly sense. Why do Christians believe what they believe?
Our great challenge today is to be as clear. And I think it was Bob Godfrey. He said, one of the things we always say about ministry and church and preaching is we ask the single great question, is it faithful? He says, I think today we have to ask, is it faithful and effective? That's just, effective in the sense that we are being clear, that we're giving.
Paul asked for, just that I be clear as I should.
That we're giving it to the people so they understand it. It's already a hurdle enough to come into a Reformed church because of the gravity of the message, the seriousness, which is so out of place today, formal in some places, very formal. All that's a hurdle to people.
Sure.
Already.
Yeah.
So you better be really accessible in the message and
at least
clear.
At least somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, so that they can walk away. And, Perkins talked about what are the two marks of faithful preaching? He's like, clarity and power.
Yeah.
They also need to sense a certain authoritative power with the message.
Yeah.
That it's like Jesus after he preached the Sermon on the Mount, right? That he says right afterwards, the people were struck out of their minds, blown out of their minds because they never heard anyone preach with authority like this, unlike the scribes and the Pharisees. So how do you balance a clarity and authority, but that this is accessibility that's offset in a way that it's going to stand out?
Well, here's one way. Why don't all these guys who are such great communicators, preachers, who are not in our tradition, reach out to us, call us on the phone and say, hey, will you sit down with me and let's talk through our differences? I'm sort of joking, but I really, this is my thing. I'm a church planter, right? But realistically, I'm who I am. I will, my personality will reach certain kind of people, whatever, like any pastor.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, we have all these people. It's I would love to see us be able to connect with a lot of what we're calling broader evangelical guys and their leaders of whatever kind they are in their churches, and try to bring them, guys, we got a program already laid out historically for you. Now let's, some of these guys are what they are by conviction and they don't agree with us. I understand that. But then there's others who are at different points in their exposure to Reformed theology or whatever. And some of it has been compelling to them at a certain point. I would love to bring in people with different styles and different gifts, different kind of people that they connect with to our churches, and they could be our pastors. That would be great.
Right.
But that, that's a whole other thing. I just think that's kind of a dream that I would have, but there has to be a mutual willingness to be open to these discussions. But, it's hard. It's people's, we get comfortable and
the experience is another aspect to this that is really important. I mean, we've kind of been talking about it, but people are used to a variety of experiences. And I think one thing we really want to accent here is, you can have different people come in. They've moved from one experience to another. So even in coming to a Reformed church, the experience can be sort of a high for a moment because I've never heard preaching that's this direct, or I've never sung the Psalms, or I've had this kind of, even that can be a kind of experience. What we want to emphasize here, and again, I appreciate your emphasis. It's not like Reformed churches just have it all down perfectly.
Yeah.
But there is something that we believe about the effectual, powerful, what we call means of grace in the preaching of the gospel, that is a longstanding historical conviction of Reformed churches, that we believe, and we can prove this, we can testify to this, that sitting under the means of grace and receiving word and sacrament is actual power. Not in the way you think, not in the way you may even experience it historically. It's actual power from God to deliver and to save. And it's important for you, and it's important for your children. I want to communicate that to people struggling with this question of Reformed and why it's important. Your children need to be fed. Your children need this too. And you cannot sustain yourself on experience alone. It's the kind of experience that comes through the word of God. And that's why in a Reformed church, everything's centered on that word. That's one of our great convictions, is like everything we do is centered on that word. It's not saying other people aren't trying to do that. It's just saying that we're trying to saturate everything we do so as to bring Christ to the people through that ministry of the word. And we believe, and we've experienced ourselves, this is true delivering power from God.
Yeah, kind of a long-term approach stands out, right? As opposed to, so it's like think of it like a fitness program or a diet, right? That, a fad thing, like if I don't do this or I don't do that, and I cut that out for 2 months, fine, I can quickly lose some weight, but I'll gain it all back and then some, right? Or a fitness program, like if I, devote myself 2 months, whatever. But if I don't have a long-term baseline program, it may not be flashy, but if I walk on a regular basis, or if I limit my calories, consistently over time, this is how you, for example, lose weight, or, how you have some level of fitness and health, right? This approach that I think modern people think about, like, we know what a fad is, and that it's seductive and it's deceiving.
We also takes effort.
Yeah. Well, yeah, an effort. But I'm just saying, in terms of spiritual fitness, this movement of revivalism, kind of, which is a label talk, teaches that there's certain keys and exciting things that you could tap into that will turbocharge your growth. Right. And what your point is, I really think it's helpful. Like it may get you on a high, but what we're looking for is long-term stability, long-term growth, and that is God's regular, patiently meeting with us over kind of a marathon program, and I mean, you're talking specifically about sitting under the preaching of the word in a faithful church.
Right.
So we need that.
It's a simple analogy, but I mean, it's a simple analogy. It's been used a million times, but it's just important to use it here. Is that you can't sustain yourself on cotton candy. I mean, I my kids don't like Brussels sprouts, but they're good for them. And a steady diet of eating healthy, you may not feel it in the moment. It's strengthening your body. There's a correlation there spiritually. A steady diet of feeding your soul with health and good food sustains you spiritually.
Right.
It doesn't always feel like that in the moment. That's okay.
Yeah.
You're building for the future. You're investing for, I mean, we all know this is a valley of tears. This is a difficult life to walk through. There's a lot of hardship in this life. You're investing in what's most important for you and your family and your children from the word of God that actually has sustaining power, even if it doesn't feel like that in the moment.
Right. Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah.
So I think your emphasis on, if there's anyone wrestling with this question of what it means to be reformed, we want to introduce you to an entire history.
Yeah.
We want to introduce you to an entire history that once you cut your teeth on it and once you spend your time on it, like I said, we've seen this so much. People are like, wow, I had no idea.
Sure.
Like, and people, even if they don't realize it in the moment, they want to be intellectually stimulated. I believe that. But they have to learn. Perfect example. And we can close on some of these thoughts. I had an older lady who, in my first charge, was like 80, and she was out attending one of sort of just kind of broad evangelical mega church. And she came into my first church, but she had grown up in a church that was very traditional, took the word seriously. And she said, Pastor, should I talk to you? She says, I'm having to retrain my whole mind on how to listen to sermons. And she goes, it's been good for me. She's 80. She said, I had been trained in the wrong way for so long. I finally feel like I'm learning to hear the word of God again, like in a way that's profitable to my soul. And that was like, that comment always stuck with me, because I thought, I think it's absolutely true. Just like anything, you have to be trained in your hearing. You have to be trained in it's that growth is sometimes slow, but this is the aim and goal of it.
Yeah.
So anything else?
You want to keep going. I got a lot more to say, but yeah.
Maybe we'll come back in the next episode and continue this thought with a few more specifics.
I think we should probably get into, I kept pushing you away from getting into the gospel issue, but I think that's pretty
Let's do that.
important. Let's talk about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to come back. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back and do the gospel. Okay? Thanks, Adam.